The main Linux desktops KDE and GNOME have had Wayland support for a very long time. New desktops are rising up, built with Wayland support from day one, like Cosmic. And there's been a bunch of Window Manager-like experiences for quite a while as well. Things like River, Hyperland, Mirrorway, Sway, and a ton of others. But those middle desktop environments, which are nowhere near as big as KDE and GNOME, but still very much have a user base, have been in this weird state of limbo for quite a while. Things like Cinnamon, Budgie, XFCE, and today's topic, LXQt or LXQT, however you want to say it. Now, we've talked about this project a little bit in the past, but now their Wayland session is actually available as a new package, LXQt Wayland Session. This package is entirely optional. If you don't want to use it, you don't have to. This is still very much experimental and work in progress, so I would understand if you don't want to touch it. If you do have it installed, you will see this in your LXQt session settings. Wayland settings, Wayland compositor, screen lock command, and then whatever you want to set it to. The way they are approaching doing a Wayland session is very, very different from what you'll see on basically any other project. There are some of those middle desktops that are doing a very similar thing, but they're not trying to be a Wayland compositor. As Wayland is quite different from X11, some features are not available, and some features are handled by the compositor, and not anymore by LXQt, so you may see some messages like this. LXQt global keys are currently unsupported under Wayland. LXQt monitor settings are currently unsupported under this Wayland compositor, and this part right here is very important. This Wayland compositor. Under X11, a lot of projects like KDE and LXQt included allow users to go and swap out the window manager for something else. So under X11, you can use, for example, i3 or BSPWM or DWM inside of KDE. So you have all of those nice KDE panels and applications, but the window manager is completely different from KWin. And in the past, this is how a lot of Ds were doing fancy effects prior to having them integrated into their own window manager. Back then, they were using Compiz. But due to the different structure of how Wayland works, with the fact that each of the desktops needs to be their own compositor, that functionality is just generally not available under Wayland. However, LXQt is being built around it. So rather than building their own compositor, which is very time-consuming and very complicated, they are relying on the compositors that are already out there. Users can choose a Wayland compositor as they choose a window manager under X11. Any wroots compatible compositor should, emphasis on that, should work, in addition to KWin Wayland. Hyperland, LabWC, KWin, Neri, Sway, River, and Wayfire will be supported out of the box, providing a basic configuration file for each of them, using different screen lockers under Wayland, including Swaylock, Waylock, and Hyperlock, is supported too. Do keep in mind, when it says any, this should be a compositor that is actually being developed. There are a lot of wroots projects out there that were started, and maybe they were being developed like 5 years ago, but not anymore. There has been a lot of changes in Wayland since that point, a lot of new protocols that emerged, a lot of new protocols that are very, very fundamental to having a good desktop experience. So if you're going to choose something, make sure it's something that is actually up to date. You cannot have a Wayland compositor right now that is feature complete, because Wayland isn't feature complete. Now, when it comes to protocol support, the very bare minimum is WLR Layer Shell Unstable v1, and for the taskbar, WLR Foreign Top-Level Management Unstable v1, which should be basically everything, right? It would be very, very unlikely you're going to find something that is so underdeveloped it is not yet properly supporting these protocols. If it is something you actually want to use, you're probably gonna be fine here. That's in the context of WL roots. As things like Smithy and Mer start having more of an ecosystem around them, you might start seeing compositors there which are also kind of half-developed, and you might still have that problem. If you are ever unsure about protocol support, just go and download Waycheck. It'll tell you everything currently supported. Now, when it comes to a screen locker, there are some very important considerations. Some desktops do have one built in. Now, most standalone window manager-like experiences don't have this, so you're going to need to find a third-party one. When we are looking at a third-party screen locker, there are two kinds. Good enough, it's a working screen locker. And fundamentally broken, never run this. This is not a good screen locker. What you need to look for is, does your compositor and does the screen locker support the protocol ext session lock? Ext session lock is the Wayland screen locker protocol. If it doesn't support this, it is a fake screen locker. Not fake as in it's trying to steal your data, but it's pretending to act like a screen locker, and there are many ways to circumvent it. Only use screen lockers that support the protocol or are built into the compositor. And I'm pretty sure when this protocol was coming in, I did a video on it. Any of the well-developed and well-supported screen lockers should have migrated over by this point. Currently, there are 3 dedicated panel backends: XEB, which is X11, General WL Roots, and KWin Wayland. The KWin Wayland supporting several features like moving windows to workspaces, workspace switcher, urgency hints, and showing desktop. Other backends can be created and added in the future, enabling similar features for other compositors like sending a scratch pad instead of minimizing windows, workspace pages, and else. PRs are welcome. Obviously, when it comes to the KWin Wayland one, this is just a single thing you need to support. But if you want to have a general Wayland or general WL Roots thing, you would need to build specific implementations for each of the known supported compositors. And again, this adds a lot of additional work, and I would imagine comes sometime down the line, but there's not just one way these things work. A lot of the stuff you want to do on Wayland is being done with internal protocols, and this is a big part of the reason why Sway is so popular, because it has the i3 API. As some applications will not work under Wayland, e.g. Redshift, some clipboard managers, and else, their auto-starting can be limited to X11 only, while on the other hand, every compositor can start Wayland-only applications like Kanshi or XDG Desktop Portal WLR. Now, I know there are a lot of Redshift fans out there. I don't really use something like that today, but there are some replacements that do exist. I don't know how well a lot of these work, and there is another version of Awesome Wayland here as well. I don't know how well a lot of these work. I have not used them myself. And it seems like because this functionality is often built into a desktop environment, there is a lot less interest in, developing this. However, there is a Wayland protocol around having this functionality, so if you want to build something, or if you want something like this, it can be done. Now, LXQT also has this handy wiki page outlining a bunch of things like what works on each of the compositors they are natively supporting, and this is a mess of a table. This obviously has drawbacks as an approach, and this table is the first indication of what the drawback actually is. And that's just talking about the stuff that they choose to actually support in the project. There are a bunch of other Wayland compositors out there that you could use with LXQt, where the state of things would be in even more of a messy, unclear state. LXQt on Wayland is acting more like a software suite that can be run under Wayland. It is up to you to take that suite, to take that toolset, and then glue it together with a Wayland compositor. I have heard others talk about this model in the past, and it's absolutely something that I'm curious to see where it actually goes, because a lot of people have said, hey, KDE, why don't you let us swap out the compositor and use out something else? But obviously in that case, it's a lot harder because a lot of core functionality is built into the compositor. It's not like on X11 where that core functionality is coming from Xorg. So if you were to swap out KWin, there are a lot of internal protocols being used, which probably, because they're internal protocols, are not actually supported on anything else, and you wouldn't have a functional desktop. Now, obviously, things can be built from the start with the idea of swapping out the Wayland compositor, but don't ever expect this feature to come to one of the big desktops. It's gonna be these smaller ones which just don't have the resources to go and build something themselves. On that note, here is another one. Shortcuts are handled exclusively by the compositor. Because of that, applications launched by such shortcuts may not exit decently on logging out if they are running before the session starts. That might result in unsafe settings on logging out. The reason is that their processes are not controlled by the LXQT session. As a workaround, you could use shortcuts that launch applications through PCManFMQ, which will make them exit gracefully when the session ends. As an example, in Hyperland, instead of just launching Featherpad, launch it through PCManFMQ. Now, this might seem really weird, like why is a file manager being used to launch applications? And I will agree, it is weird, but the way that a lot of desktops handle desktop icons, now desktop icons aren't really that common anymore, but the way that it was traditionally done on Linux is through the file manager. This probably sounds stupid, but think about it like this. The desktop is a way to manage your files, and it's typically linked to a folder called desktop. So in a sense, the desktop is also a file manager, and it kinda makes sense to be in that application. Now, it probably should be a standalone application that is specifically built for that purpose, but, you know, most people don't run desktop icons anyway. Now, whilst this model might work fine for people who are actually going out of their way to install LXQt and configure it themselves, when it comes to a distro shipping a version with LXQt pre-configured, this is where you might start to see some issues where the window manager installed isn't necessarily what the user would expect, and getting dropped into the Wayland side without knowing what compositor it actually is makes it really annoying to go and actually configure it to be the way you want it to be. Obviously, you can go and swap it out, but keep in mind, if you're installing something pre-configured, you installed it pre-configured for a reason. But I do think the model is worth exploring, so let me know what you think down below. Do you think this is a reasonable model? Do you want to see more desktops trying it out? Obviously, some are just going to do it anyway, regardless of what you say, but are you curious to see what actually happens? I'd love to know. So if you liked the video, go like the video. And if you really liked the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, Scribe, Pay, linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and if you're an LXQt user, let me know, have you tried this out?